Make sure you guys hit the subscribe button if you guys are enjoying the content that we're throwing up. And make sure you guys hit the like button if you enjoy the video. And yeah, let's begin. Okay, so I am kind of late to this and I am exhausted. We just got back from Lexington and Cleveland, and it's been a very, very busy but exciting week. But I am very, very tired right now. So this video will be a little bit lackluster in comparison to the other ones that I make. But like I said, I'm a little late to this party. But the post-credit scene for Spider-Man Far From Home, I don't know anybody who hasn't really seen it yet. And considering this comes out on this coming Sunday, it kind of makes sense, that most people would have seen it by now. So I guess spoiler alert for those who haven't. There's two post-credit scenes. The first one's pretty self-explanatory, right? I mean, it's basically like J.K. Simmons comes back, he plays J. Jonah Jameson, Peter Parker's identity is dumped to the world, that kind of a thing. And then there's the second post-credit scene. And it's kind of funny because a lot of people are referencing S.W.O.R.D, and I guess to a degree that's true, but I would actually say it's probably the Alpha Flight initiative now that I think about it, like the Alpha Flight program. So in Marvel Comics, you've got a bunch of different organizations, right? Like you have S.W.O.R.D, the Sentient World Observation and Response Department. You've got Armor, the alternate reality monitoring, monitoring and operational response agency, I think is what it's called. Basically S.W.O.R.D monitors extraterrestrial planets, right? Like it monitors space, and Armor monitors like alternate realities. And then you have S.H.I.E.L.D, which most everybody knows monitors Earth, right? And all of them are designed to be security for the planet Earth. So if like Dormammu invaded from an alternate dimension, or like some evil version of Doctor Strange showed up from an alternate reality, then Armor would basically alert the superheroes on Earth. Now, whether or not they'd be powerful enough to stop him would be a whole different discussion. But the fact remains, like there's a bunch of different organizations that serve various purposes. And even then, like there's still organizations beyond those, right? Like, you have all kinds of different groups and things like that. You got Factor 3 and you got all kinds of stuff out there. S.W.O.R.D originally made its debut back in Astonishing X-Men issue number 6, I think it was, by Joss Whedon. And the idea behind this was that it was led by a woman named Abigail Brand. Now, Abigail Brand was tasked with leading S.W.O.R.D because she was a person, or really like an alien more or less, who had like this spiked tongue, and she could essentially speak like a myriad of different languages, right? Like every language on Earth, and then like almost every language in the universe, right? So she was the perfect person to be a kind of liaison between extraterrestrial groups and like Earth itself, right? Because if there's like aliens who are refugees from a different world, but they don't speak English, a language native to Earth, then like when they showed up, if S.W.O.R.D wasn't there, then like they would be treated as a threat, right? Like hence the basis behind Nick Fury calling in Thor to face off against Beta Ray Bill. So when you take that whole concept and you apply it to the Marvel Cinematic Universe, you go through the history of it, right? So S.W.O.R.D was led by Abigail Brand for a number of years, and in reality, S.W.O.R.D was a plot device. It was basically just the purpose that Joss Whedon used in order to like bring back Colossus and like one or two other characters, and then have like some guy show up who wreaked all kinds of havoc and so on. But for years, S.W.O.R.D just kind of existed out there, and they had some stories, right? I mean, they had stories that involved them and invoked their knowledge of space and different things like that. Because when Joss Whedon and John Cassaday did Astonishing X-Men, it was back in 2004, right? So like following that, you went into like Annihilation and Annihilation Conquest and things like that. And while S.W.O.R.D wasn't the biggest part of it, it did like have some involvement in it. And so following that, you went into like all new, all different Marvel, right? So you had S.W.O.R.D as an organization doing its thing, and Hickman even invoked it during the events of like of the multiversal collapse, right? So like you had S.W.O.R.D, and then you had like Robert DaCosta's Advanced Idea Mechanics and so on and so forth, who were kind of working in unison. And then S.W.O.R.D was sort of co-opted by Robert DaCosta and AIM, and then turned into like the Multiversal Avengers. But the idea behind that was that with the multiversal collapse taking place, S.W.O.R.D was one of a multitude of organizations using all their resources to figure out what was going on, and to look into space and see if they could find the answer to it. Ultimately, they didn't, and of course, the multiverse collapsed inevitably. It ended up being just like Doctor Strange and the Molecule Man, and like a couple other people who figured out what was going on, that it was basically Doctor Doom who ended up causing everything, and I guess working alongside Molecule Man. But the fact remains, following the start of all new, all different Marvel, that Abigail Brand was basically removed as the director of S.W.O.R.D, and she was replaced with Carol Danvers. And then S.W.O.R.D was kind of wiped away in its entirety and replaced by the Alpha Flight program. And the reason why was because Alpha Flight was a Canadian superhero team, right? Like they were part of Canada's Department H or Department K, I can't remember which one it is, but they were basically part of Canada's like super top secret superhero organization thing, which had like Vindicator and like Sasquatch Sasquatch and a handful of others. I don't think Vindicator was part of the Alpha Flight program. I think the Vindicator program had long since been like removed and eliminated by the time Alpha Flight came around. But Alpha Flight was basically just the Canadian superhero team, and they have their small fan base, and it's really dedicated. But honestly, I never really cared about Alpha Flight, and so in order to kind of take part in like the all new, all different Marvel, Marvel basically took the Alpha Flight concept and applied it to S.W.O.R.D. and then said, now it's the Alpha Flight program. And so what you ended up having was like these huge numbers of like Skrulls and so on who were working and really like a lot of humans who were working as part of the new Alpha Flight program, which is to say like working inside their base of operations and monitoring things and so on and so forth. Then you had Carol Danvers who was leading it, and under her you had Alpha Flight, which is basically like the reconnaissance team, right? So like if something popped off in space, Alpha Flight would be the ones who would go and they would look at it and see what was going on. That's where things stand right now, and they have for quite some time. Carol Danvers is kind of in a weird middle ground, right? Because after the events of Civil War II, basically every fan in like Marvel Comics, almost every single fan hated Carol Danvers, right? Because like it was kind of like, okay, so basically like she was written to kill Tony Stark, she was character assassinated by Brian Michael Bendis, and so people really like hated her character going from there. Marvel's kind of tried to backpedal on that and try to fix a little bit, and her stories right now are actually pretty good. But I don't remember if she's still in charge of the Alpha Flight program or not. But regardless of the situation, in all honesty, in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, I'd say that's the direction that they're going, because it doesn't really make sense for the MCU to introduce a new team or a new concept based on like old hat stuff, right? I mean, Captain America, sure, but even when you look at like Iron Man or you look at like Spider-Man or any of those characters, they're based on like modern day depictions of the characters, right? So like if you look at Spider-Man's suit in Spider-Man Far From Home, it's almost identical to the suit from like all new, all different Marvel. So it makes sense that they would reference new events instead of old events. But at the end of the day, I would say that what's most likely going to go on here is we're going to get the Alpha Flight program, and that in turn is going to lead to the introduction of the Fantastic Four. But what they would end up doing, at least what I would do anyway, is I would have like little post-credit scenes over the course of like a whole bunch of movies that would just have S.W.O.R.D referencing or Alpha Flight program, whatever, referencing like Galactus' existence or like the Silver Surfer showing up. The first step would be like an encounter with S.W.O.R.D or with Alpha Flight, whatever that program is. There's a ton of things they could do to expand their cosmic landscape. Say, hey, like there's some guy flying out there with a helmet. There's a zillion things that they could do. And even then, like you could have it tie into the larger whole, right? So like if they ever decide to introduce Sam Alexander, right? Like Nova, they could basically say, yeah, like we know about the Nova Force, or at least we've heard of it, and kind of send him on a mission or whatever. There's a lot of things that they could do. I mean, it really, like the options are limitless. And honestly, I'm so tired, I can't really even think of a whole lot of them right now. but nonetheless, you know, the opportunity's there to really expand on the Marvel Cinematic Universe with regards to like the cosmic landscape and like the cosmic scope of things, because you're talking about introducing an organization that really serves no other purpose than to monitor space and to like tell us what's out there in space. So it opens up like a whole new world, because that's one of the things you guys have to keep in mind when it comes to the Marvel Cinematic Universe. I mean, like if you really just count numbers wise, like they've only ever hit like the very tip of the iceberg, right? So like we have Black Panther and Wakanda, so you can kind of count that as one whole thing. You have the Avengers in the form of like Black Widow, Hawkeye, Thor, Captain America, Iron Man, the Incredible Hulk, like, you know, and that's really kind of it in terms of the roster or the lineup. You've got Doctor Strange, you got Spider-Man, you've just got like what's basically kind of like a hodgepodge and a smattering of characters here and there in comparison to like everything that makes up the entirety of Marvel Comics, right? So like just based on not even using alternate realities or even anything out there in space, they can develop superheroes on Earth like forever, like for years and years and years. I mean, if they do like a movie every 2 years, you're talking about like almost 100 years before they even began to come close to even touching on the possibility of exploring every single hero on Earth, right? Because there's like all of Excalibur, there's like all that stuff there. There's all the X-Men. That means like the entirety of the mutant population, whatever form that takes. You've got Magneto and there's a ton of things that they could do after this. So again, I think this is really going to be a way for them to kind of introduce the Fantastic Four into the Marvel Cinematic Universe and then just kind of go from there. Because in reality, if I'm the MCU, if I'm Kevin Feige in them, I'm introducing the Fantastic Four before I'm introducing the X-Men. And the reason why is that while the X-Men are more popular, the Fantastic Four are the original superhero team. And like in Marvel Comics, the Fantastic Four were the means by which Marvel introduced new characters and teams, right? So like struggling characters or characters characters they wanted to bring in and introduce to readers, they did it in the Fantastic Four. Amazing Spider-Man #1, Peter Parker goes and tries to join the Fantastic Four. Black Panther, introduced in the Fantastic Four. The Inhumans, introduced in the Fantastic Four. The X-Men teamed up with them on a multitude of occasions because the sales were kind of slumping, and it was a way to sort of try to boost them. Thor teamed up with the Fantastic Four. It's one of these things that you always see happen. Iron Man, so on and so forth. Everybody had their hands in that team because they were the first family of Marvel Comics. So I would introduce them in before I introduce the X-Men in, despite the fact that I'm a massive fan of the X-Men. So nonetheless, again, I'm kind of late to the party here, but that's just the way it goes. Figured I'd make this video, throw it out there, let you guys know at least what's going on, or at least some idea of what to expect in the future of the MCU. And yeah, so with that being said, we're going to bring this video to an end. If you guys are new here to Comics Explained, make sure you guys hit the sub button to become part of the Rob Corps. If you guys enjoyed this video, make sure you drop a like, and I will catch you all later. Peace.